Baden-Powell was once asked, what's this motto, be prepared? And he says, well, for just about any old thing. Well, tonight we're going to talk about emergency preparedness. It has occurred to me that there's a lot of different aspects of emergency preparedness that I think we as leaders, as adult leaders and senior scouts and even patrol leaders need to be thinking about, especially tailored to your area of wherever you might live. There are probably specific disasters that can occur. For example, wildfire, where it burns through a community, or a tornado that knocks down trees and maybe kills people and damages homes. Hurricanes that cause extensive damage, or for that matter, tsunamis that we've seen happen in places like Hawaii and in Indonesia. So let's talk a little bit about emergency preparedness. Now, the first thing I think we need to think about on emergency preparedness, and by the way, Elliott, you just chime in anytime you want, okay? And okay. All right, that sounds good. Well, the Scouts have an emergency preparedness merit badge because they recognize that it's good to have Scouts be prepared for things and to think in the broader terms of helping the community and helping their family. And so the first thing is to be prepared in terms of knowing first aid and having equipment, having preparations. A lot of people suggest that a family should have what are called bug out bags in case they need to make a hurried exit of their home. A fire's coming, some other sort of problem that they really have to leave. And so each person needs to have like a backpack that they can carry. And in that backpack, they should have a list. You can make your own list. We're not going to sit here and provide a list because it's going to might vary from place to place. But one of the obvious things is to have some drinking water that you can take with you. And another is cash, money, because you may need that. You may need things like knives, maybe to cut things with. I mean, let's face it, it's pretty hard to break fishing line or thick rope with your teeth. And so just a whole list of things, maybe small first aid kit. When we had our emergency preparedness first aid, wilderness first aid thing with David McLaughlin, he said we should all have a small handbook of first aid to carry with us. And so you should have your own first aid kit, but it should be in your bug out bag. Now, if you get ready to go camping or something like that, or go on a long car trip, you can just take that out of your bug out bag, or you can take the whole bag with you. Of course, some people say weapons of some kind, and that's obviously a family choice. And you obviously need to comply with your local and federal laws, wherever you might be, about such things. You should have matches. It's as much as we like to think we could start fire with friction or some other method, which I'm sure we'll go over on one of our podcasts. You should have matches, and they should be waterproof. That's another thing you need to bear in mind, that things that you might have, things get wet, and so you need to be prepared for that. As most of you know, if you might have to face any kind of cold conditions whatsoever, wool is a much better insulator than any other fabric, because wool, even though wet, can help you retain bodily warmth. And so, for example, if you might want to just have an old ratty wool sweater and wrapped up, and have it perhaps even be in a plastic bag or something within that. Speaking of which, in backpacking, we learned, of course, that if you subdivide things, you have one bag that has the food in it, and inside that bag you have the different aspects of your food, like your spices in one, your sugar in another, and so forth. And in the backpack you have your clothing in a separate bag, so you're not just digging around through it. And by the same token, your bug out bag should be subdivided. And a lot of people suggest you having for a bug out bag one of these complicated but smaller bags that has external zipper closed pockets. Now, I'm a big believer in zipper closures, or the kind of pockets that so you don't get off halfway to someplace and find that something has slipped out of a pocket. That could be fatal. Another thing I think that people should think about in being prepared is having heavy gauge um, trash bags, because they can be used for any number of things, including making emergency rain gear by just cutting holes and all that sort of stuff. And so obviously these are things that I hope you will take to your troop, your patrol, your den, your friends, or whatever, your family, and talk about what you need to do. Now, parents also will need to be thinking about having paperwork. Unfortunately, we live in a world that might need paperwork. So, for example, you may want to have photocopies of things like passports or the passports themselves, driver's licenses, maybe credit cards. Now, that's a dangerous one because you don't want it to fall into the wrong hands. Copies of any permits that you might have to have, things to prove. So if you were to, for example, come up to a police roadblock or something, you could have your identification with you. In a rush leaving of the home, you might leave something behind that's important. So at least if it's always in the bug out bag, your regular licenses and all you'll be carrying with you in a wallet probably, or a purse. But your bug out bag would have copies of these things in there. And then, of course, those would have the license numbers and the passport number and so forth on them. Elliott, do you have anything to add to this idea?
I most certainly do,
No.
and thank you for asking. Here I have the emergency preparedness pamphlet as seen by Scouting America, and for their personal emergency service bag, they have the following, and I'll read them aloud. If you can see them, maybe you can. I don't know if it's big enough. Maybe it's not. But it says a poncho or raincoat with hood or rain hat, change of underwear and socks, small bag with toothbrush, toothpaste, soap, comb, needle, thread, shoelaces, and toilet paper, a sleeping bag or bedroll of 2 wool blankets, like you mentioned, that wool, and a waterproof ground cloth, the maps of areas where your troop is likely to serve, 50 feet of number 5 sash cord or similar size nylon cord, pocket knife and axe or saw, water treatment equipment, cook kit and canteen, flashlight, battery powered radio, extra batteries, stored separately, of course, hard hat, other equipment as determined by weather conditions like winter jacket, rubber boots, gloves, etc. Personal first aid kit. You can order a personal first aid kit through your local council service center, or you can make your own, including gauze, bandages, and pads, adhesive bandages, soap, antibiotic ointment, or biotic, depending on how you pronounce that from where you're from, for burns and roller bandages.
Hey,
Matches,
Elliott,
yeah, yes.
Matt, if I may interrupt you, can you increase your volume a little bit? I want to make
Okay.
sure that we can anybody listening in their car can hear what we have to say very clearly and be giving a lot of thought to these things. And man, this list is much more. This is a very good list. Thank you so much for bringing this up tonight.
Yes. I don't know if I can increase my volume right here, right now, but I can worry about that later.
All right, that
Um,
sounds good.
Matches in a waterproof container, emergency rations such as energy bar, energy gel, etc., that's well wrapped, pencil and small notebook, bandana, compass and map of the area or GPS to be sure you have a set of fresh batteries, watch, unless you usually wear one, which I do, facial tissues, work gloves, dust masks for air filtering, boots and long sleeve shirt and long pants and goggles or safety goggles. Now, this particular personal emergency service bag is referring to when you would go out to do certain things like community cleanups after some sort of emergency, is what it sounds like to me. The other list that is on the page just prior to this in the emergency preparedness pamphlet is the major disaster preparedness items, and the following items are helpful during an emergency or if you are safe staying in your home and an evacuation has not been ordered. And these are some of the things you had hit on a little bit earlier. The list of emergency telephone numbers and out of town contacts in case local lines are busy, which that's a little tired these days because local lines being busy is not much of a, doesn't have that big of an effect on us now. A fire extinguisher, a toolkit, which is an axe, shovel, broom, screwdriver, pliers, hammer, coil of a half-inch rope, coil of baling wire, duct tape, razor blades, adjustable wrench for turning off gas or water, a simple chart showing where shutoff valves are located, including the main electrical switch, portable fire escape ladder for homes or buildings of more than one level, and portable stove with an appropriate fuel, used outdoors away from garage or carport to avoid the danger of carbon monoxide poisoning. Some of these things are things that you'll learn as you go along. Some of these things are important to remember right then and right there.
Well, that one thing that one could do is, for example, copy that very page and have it in one's garage or tool room. So, because I've known many a time when, for example, we were just going to go out on a project somewhere, fix a fence or something of that nature, and you get halfway there or all the way there and realize you've left something important. Checklists are so important. Look at an airplane. I don't know if you're familiar with much about piloting airplanes, but even the most experienced pilots always use a checklist so they can go through each thing and they don't forget some important aspect and they get halfway up in the air and have a problem. Um, so a checklist would be very useful. One thing that occurs to me about is that we'll get into, I guess, or we're into it now, is the idea that you and your family are part of a community, and your community should know who has, for example, chainsaws and that are working, and if you have chainsaws, they need to be cranked every now and then and kept in good working condition and have enough fuel to run them in case you had in our area, for example, in Georgia, we have risk of tornadoes. And every now and then one will come through, and a bunch of scouts and other helpful people will go over and work on that project. Well, they need to have sharpening equipment. They need to have the chainsaws, hopefully 2 or 3 chainsaws, maybe extra blades, and sharpening equipment and protective equipment. I for years I didn't use proper protective equipment. I'd use goggles or something, but now I have the helmet with the face shield, and I have the pants that are made out of Teflon or whatever they're made out of, Kevlar. So as to help protect myself from inadvertent hitting of the leg or something with a running chainsaw, and of course gloves. You mentioned gloves, and I'm sure that anybody who has ever gone skiing or been in very cold weather or even moderately cold weather knows how the hands lose their ability to work at about, say, 30 degrees. And so it's just important to have gloves for warmth and for protection. Right. Now, did I interrupt your reading of your list there?
No, it's okay. It was almost over, anyways. I did
So,
want to add, because of what I
yes.
do professionally now, I write service for lawn equipment like chainsaws. And you were talking about the personal protective equipment, or PPE as it's called in the medical industry and also in logging and all sorts of other things, but personal protective equipment. Something that I learned in the past few years is how those chainsaw chaps work. Those are those pants that you're referring to that you wear over your regular working pants. Now, it's made out of Kevlar, like you were saying, but it's also just got a whole bunch of really thick cotton padding on there. And what the function of that padding is once that chainsaw starts running and it gets that chain going really nice and fast, and it grabs onto that cotton and cotton and Kevlar mixture of fabric, what it does is it actually gathers up inside the sprocket and between the chain and the sprocket, and it makes it choke the saws out. Now, when I say choke the saws out, what I'm referring to is the carburetor on that chainsaw and how the carburetor mixes the air and the fuel. Some of our viewers may or may not know this. The function of a carburetor is to mix air and fuel together so that it can squirt it into the piston and cylinder to ignite it. And if you take off the air, that's choking that machine. And once you choke that machine out, it can't run. Now, something that's interesting about today's world is we have a lot of electrical equipment and battery operated equipment now, especially in the lawn and garden industry. And some of that transfers over to the chainsaws. And something important that must be noted is that electric, like plug-in chainsaws that plug into your AC outlet at home, or for a battery operated chainsaw, there is no choking out of a battery operated chainsaw.
Mm-hmm.
Once it's going, it can continue to go. So that's why that safety equipment, that particular those Kevlar and cotton chaps that would work on those uh, fuel powered chainsaws would not work on those battery powered chainsaws as easily. So it's important if you're using electric or battery saws in your emergency preparedness and saving situations, that battery chainsaws can be even a little bit more dangerous than the gas powered chainsaws.
Well, I would think that the Kevlar itself, Kevlar is mighty tough, and it's probably more than one layer thick. You know,
Yeah,
they make body armor, maybe 7 layers of Kevlar thick, and so I would imagine that I haven't tried cutting through my chaps, my Kevlar chaps, but I do think this, as I think that I was foolish not to have that kind of protective equipment during the many years that I have used a chainsaw. And another thing about is eye protection is extremely important, and it could be in an emergency preparedness situation. Eye protection is very important, if only because you have to stop what you're doing and get objects out of the eye. And of course, some objects can't be gotten out of the eye except by a professional. I had a man working for me who didn't wear eye protection, and he hit some concrete with a pick, and he thought he got a piece of concrete in his eye, but he didn't. He had a little tiny sliver of steel in his eye. And my brother-in-law, who was an eye doctor, said he had treated many a person that had a little sliver of steel off of a hammer or nail or something like that in the eye. And that's particularly dangerous because in about a day or two, that thing will rust. And so, and it's stuck in there. So it's got to be gotten out. And I'm not sure if my first aid abilities would extend to that, but that's eye protection can sure save you a lot of grief in life. And another thing I'd like to kind of segue into in this discussion, and we could talk all night about it, was community organization. I think a great many communities are not really organized in a way that I think they need to be. For example, during World War II in England, and Great Britain, they were facing the imminent invasion by German forces in 1940 and 41. And so they got the whole society working, and scouts were part of that, both as observers and observing aircraft coming in, running communications, things like that. But I think that every sheriff's office should have lists of all the different community assets, and scouts are part of that community assets, just like churches are. What do you do if people are lost their housing because of a tornado or a hurricane? Well, what are the available buildings that are there? The large warehouses and all. And then a lot of troops have calling systems, so that, for example, if the troop is called to action, yeah, that the scoutmaster tells the senior patrol leader, and he calls up 3 people, and they have 3 or 4 people on their web. They call and they call and they call, and so everybody gets 1 or 2 calls saying where the troop's going to meet, what they're going to do. And I would say that any troop that moves into action to help people should wear uniforms. A uniform, as I've said in these things, a uniform conveys authority and capacity. Now, in addition to conveying capacity, really a scout, a person needs to have capacity. And that's where the first aid training comes in. And the guy that shows up with the proper equipment is going to be given the deference that he deserves. Feel free to jump in, Elliott. Tonight we didn't have one of these outside expert guests to work with us on these things, but I think that we all are grown-ups and we all know what we're talking about. And we'll probably hear from people around the world who have similar stories of scout preparation and scouts getting into action and as organizations. What do we have on our list here?
Well,
Mobilization plan. That's what I was thinking about. Is a mobilization plan that I believe the merit badge asks to have a mobilization plan for the family, right?
yes, and what I was gonna say,
Yeah.
is back when I was a scout and taking the emergency preparedness merit badge, I took it at Camp Thunder, and I took it at a picnic table and just by Howard Field, and it was awesome. And I remember the teacher was very knowledgeable for, I think, a 16 or 17-year-old kid, and I was 12 or 13. But really knowledgeable, and I had a really good time. But I learned more afterwards when I was preparing my family mobilization kit. That's part of the mirror badge. I forget exactly which requirement at the moment, but putting together a big box full of fun things that we might need in case something crazy happens, like a flood or a tornado or a fire or some sort of civil thing, whatever may could have happened in my 12 or 13-year-old brain. The possibilities were endless, and so were the things that we might need to eat. And I remember some of them being those energy chews that I talked about on the list just a little while ago, and some of them were cans of beanie weenies and spam, I think. But I've always kind of been a guy who likes to eat things, as you can tell by my wonderful physique. And I remember the most exciting part was, oh, what might we eat in case if something happens? But also the amount of water that's actually required, not necessarily for the requirement of the merit badge, but something that I think about often is just how much water uh, a family of 5 would need, because that's what I currently have now is a family of 5, and how quickly we'd go through it, because I myself, I drink a lot of water. I just drink a lot of water. I can just continue, and that could be the only thing I drink indefinitely, and I will drink a lot of it. So I just imagine in these situations, do you have a store of water somewhere in your house other than a case of water bottles?
We have a small store. What we do is clean milk jugs and make sure they're fine, and then put water in them. It's chlorinated by the government, of course, but then you can always put just a tiny drop of bleach or something like that in. What you don't want to, obviously, is to have scum form in there, some kind of for the water to go and be dangerous. During the war, of course, during World War II, the troops were issued iodine tablets, and water purification tablets, and you'd put them in your canteen, one little tablet per canteen, and the water wouldn't taste very good, but you'd shake it up and let it sit for a while, and it would supposedly kill all the bacteria. Now, and boy, some of those places, jungles and wherever, they had a lot of bacteria. And there's plenty of YouTube videos that people can see about how to filter water, make a simple filter out of sand and rocks, and go through a jar and that gets the larger stuff out of it. And you can, obviously, water can sit and the clays will settle out if given enough time. But
that reminds me, speaking of last week when we were speaking with Trisha about high adventure,
yes,
one of the places that I had to learn about water filtration and purification is in Northern Tier. One of the things they have in the land of 1,000 lakes, as we talked about, is beavers, and beavers will carry something called giardia in their feces, and if you happen to catch giardia from any stale or non-moving water, which there's plenty of it up there,
yeah.
it can be pretty detrimental to your health and well-being, I'll say.
I think I had it one time from drinking out of streams in Georgia. Just when I was a kid, we'd do that. It's a nice stream and all that, but you can get it here too, I think. And I remember having basically stomach aches for a month. And it was like every day. And so and then that brings up, you mentioned filtration. And so all these places like REI and online, you can find filtration, but it's an area of concern where you shouldn't cut corners. It's your whole family's health. You can get filtration units. Of course, you can always boil water. That was the traditional way to do it. And that's probably one of the reasons why tea drinking and things in not ancient times, in the 1800s, drinking tea and coffee was healthy, was because it required boiling the water. And that would help, I think, would stop cholera and things like that, typhoid. But pure water is very important, and that's why I was thinking that some bottled water in your escape equipment or your bug out bag, 3 or 4 things, and have them be where they won't just break open and leak and ruin everything and not be useful for drinking. But you really have to have that. I can think of a 2-year-old child that you're responsible for, and you can't just tell them suck it up, and be thirsty. That child's going to cry and really need help. And we all need to have water every day. It's so important. Food we can go without for 3 weeks, but even those who are fairly slender can go 3 weeks without food. But water, that's important. Back to the mobilization plan, there's an area of concern these days that I think it's unpleasant to even think about, but it's the problem of a kidnapping or something like that. There needs to be a family code word so that if somebody, for example, uses AI to pretend like they have captured a family member and now they're trying to extort money out of the family, or some other kind of obedience, there needs to be a secret family code word that the family agrees on. You're familiar with this problem, I'm sure, you people out there, and you, Elliott, and so that's just something that we it's protecting ourselves. So what are I was also thinking in terms of the mobilization is we all need to talk to our local authorities and basically say, what is the plan? I worry about worries maybe not the right word, but who has the authority in a community to, for example, put up a roadblock? Who has the authority to, if any, to seize private property? For example, a gas station that if there was a big national disaster, who has the authority to come in and tell the owner of the gas station, you can't pump any gas? We're saving that for our emergency vehicles or the Army or something like that. So that line of authority needs to be clear way before any disaster occurs, because otherwise you're going to have these various people who assume authority that they don't legally have, and then other people might say, well, wait a minute, you really don't have that authority, and I'm going to go through this roadblock. Or you can just imagine all the scenarios that involves. I remember there was when Katrina hit in New Orleans, a mass of people, as I recall it, went walking out over a bridge, and this community there blocked itself off and said, no, you can't just come off the public highway into the community. And then the question arises, why not? And so that is a problem. So please, wherever you are in the world, try to, as scout leaders or leaders of your community, try to think about the issues of authority in advance. So it's not just the man with the gun is the one that makes the rules. Elliott, you got anything to add to that particular idea?
No, I'm starting to get a little existential dread, to be honest.
Well, that don't we all have that dread?
I hope so.
Well, I keep thinking that we all know that, for example, when 9/11 happened in the United States, suddenly all airplanes all over the country were grounded. And so if you were somewhere needed in your private plane or something, you just couldn't fly home. And so that was a problem. And so who had the authority to stop that? Well, I guess the FAA did, but you can easily imagine police or Army or whatever basically declaring martial law and acting accordingly. Now, I made some notes about emergency preparedness that I thought was the most important. In some ways, it's kind of the most important general merit badge that a Scout Council should emphasize and emphasize it council wide. And one of my notes says this: when first aid is taught, make sure even little scouts and cubs pay attention by emphasizing how it might be their own parents, sisters, or brothers whose life-threatening wounds they may have to treat. Now, you're welcome to pause on this thing and think about these thoughts. I think that's very important. That a lot of times children are not really paying attention during first aid sessions. Well, they have to be awakened to the reality, and the grim reality that they may have to save a life. And it may be the life of somebody very important to them. And so I pointed out before, and I'll continue to talk about how they also need to understand what to do at the scene of a wreck, how they may be the most knowledgeable person there, and they need to, insofar as they're able to, take charge and make sure that bad first aid is not rendered to injured people. So it's a matter of taking responsibility. And you just said you were worried about the gloom and doom. Well, notice this last paragraph where it says, by openly discussing possible gloom and doom scenarios with your cubs and scouts and their parents, your scouts will see their own self-interest in many subjects and will take pride in the skills they are learning. Gardening, for an example, is an art that should be learned and practiced before it becomes a necessity. So are life saving, shotgun and rifle shooting, wilderness survival, firemanship, and many other skills that we have, we being the scouts and the Baden-Powell movement. We have a framework and a framework of learning, and we all have a duty to pass it on. And of course, it may be that when we're old, we're going to need people who know what they're doing to take care of us. The responsibility is ours. Scouting provides us the tools and organization we need. So let's get busy. Now, Elliott, I want to do kind of a little wrap up thing. And before that, do you have something you'd like to add to this short discussion we've had about this extremely important subject?
Not at this time. No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay, well, in a sense, we're trying just to get people thinking, right? And get people proud of the scouts, for one thing, and proud of what they're doing, and children understanding how they're growing into adulthood, and they have these responsibilities, these possibilities, these dangers that they need to be working seriously to address. Now, all that said, I'd like to just something we have not talked about too much was that at the end of this and all these podcasts, we'll have a series of links that you can see some of the things that we've produced in the past. We have some shorts that were done, and they were called, they were under Baden-Powell Scouting, and you'll see those links to my being a Baden-Powell reenactor, and then talking just like a Scoutmaster minute on a scout is trustworthy, a scout is loyal, or whatever, and just for a minute or two talking about each one of those. And they might be a framework for a Scoutmaster minute, or something that could even be used at a meeting, which is Baden-Powell talking to you about something. Now, also on my website, that's kind of the basic website we're using at this time, you can see links to things like a lot of novels I've written, a couple of books of poetry, and maybe more importantly, for the purposes of what we're doing here, is there's a talk that Baden-Powell gave to the Burns Club of Atlanta, and so you can see him talking about his history and his how he and others started the Scout movement and things like that. And so that's just one of the kind of Baden-Powell acts, if we can call it that you can look at. And we may do some more, but when we made these podcasts, it was some people, friends and family indicated that they thought that authenticity of it being me, Walker, and I'm not saying I'm a great guy or anything like that, but they thought the authenticity of having somebody talk rather than pretending to be Baden-Powell, though I think I do a pretty good job of pretending to be Baden-Powell, is they thought that was what we should do. And so that's the format we have. Now, we would like for you also to feel free to send email to us. You'll find my email address on that website, and you can suggest topics. You can suggest people who we should have on our podcast. We hope that there will be people who have, like David McLaughlin and Tricia from last week. You may have seen, she just got back from Philmont Scout Ranch, had a great trip. It was her second trip to Philmont, and it talked not just about what a cool place Philmont is, but the whole idea of young people being exposed to outdoor ventures, extended outdoor adventures. Now, Elliott, for example, was at the northern tier on an extended outdoor adventure where they have canoes and they had to portage over and fight the mosquitoes. And I've been on some extended adventures like in northern Sweden where fighting mosquitoes and hiking over mountains. And then I stayed with the Lapps for a couple of nights. The reindeer herding people in northern Sweden, and so that kind of thing is just things that we are going to be talking about on our podcast, and I hope you'll all enjoy them and ask your friends, get your friends and your scouts to listen and think about these issues we want to raise, and then give us some feedback. We'd love to have that, wouldn't we, Elliott?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Any
Do we have
feedback
a
is good feedback.
Do we have a feedback now capacity here on our, so we have it live? We're going to, these are not live right now. They are going to be live soon, and you'd be able to give feedback, but you can always just send us emails and
Yeah.
and we'd
Leaving comments on the YouTube would be the best way to get immediate feedback now. Sending an email to walker@walkerchandler.com is another really good way. I know Walker's very prompt with his email responses. Until the floodgates open, maybe we'll get so famous and popular we won't be able to handle it anymore, and we'll have to get Nick to do it.
All right, that sounds great. Good night, everybody. Have great scouting, and I know you'll be the kind of leaders that the world needs. And thank you so much for watching. And we'll, just like it says on our little banner down there, we want first-class scouts and first-class citizens. Thank you.